After watching this premiere episode of Peacemaker Season 2, I do, in fact, still want to taste it. Really want to taste it. Hello, interwebs! I hope you are all doing well, and I am here to review the season premiere of the second season of Peacemaker. Or technically, I guess, the first season of Peacemaker within the new DCU? However you want to qualify it, I am really excited to talk about this. I've made no bones about the fact that James Gunn is far and away one of my favorite directors and writers working within the mainstream space. Like, there's just so few creators that can be at the level that he is at and not only maintain an authorial vision that feels very clear, but do so in a way that is actually feeling like it's doing new things, saying new things, pushing things forward, being very hopeful and optimistic, and yet still can wrestle with some of the darkest topics that we have to wrestle with, like with the first season of Peacemaker literally dealing with white supremacy. But still doing it in a fun way, in a way that feels affirming and inclusive, and yet actually wrestles with the depth of these topics. And he did it again in Superman, which is such a hopeful movie, and yet was very clearly speaking about imperialism, genocide, things like that speak very much to today, like what's going on with Ukraine and with Israel and Gaza. So I just really love him. So when I saw Peacemaker was coming out again, I'm like, oh yes, I am so freaking pumped for this. And I will get into discussing this whole premiere because I really, really liked it, and it creates a really good setup for the entire season. But there's just a small moment in this episode that I just want to note because it just speaks to why I love James Gunn so much in such a small way, where we have this joke where he goes to do the interview for the Justice Gang, which I'll talk more about in a second. But Green Lantern has this like, oh yeah, he's good at sucking dicks joke, which could easily come across as this, easy homophobic joke. And it makes sense for Green Lantern to do that joke and just let it lie there of like, yeah, he sucks dick, he sucks, that sort of thing. And it's a funny joke, it's fine. It makes sense for Green Lantern. He's the kind of character that would say that, especially after seeing him in Superman and the Guy Gardner version of him that Nathan Fillion's playing. But then when Peacemaker goes back into the car and he says to Adebayo, oh, apparently one of my skills is sucking dick. It's not a problem. It's not an insult. It's a compliment. It's like the show acknowledging, and it's through Peacemaker, but it's him acknowledging like, yeah, it's not a bad thing to suck a dick, And he's a bisexual character, and it's like acknowledging his bisexuality, also acknowledging that it's not a punching down joke, like the changing the context of the joke so that like, yeah, the character of Guy Gardner is making this joke, but the show itself acknowledges that it's a homophobic joke, and we can like not necessarily punch down in that way. It's just a self-awareness on James Gunn's part of how to even kind of have his cake and eat it too and do these like raunchy jokes that he's, always been known for throughout his career, but also signal that like he is aware of the people that are coming into the show. There's an awareness of like who his characters are, who don't just let that stuff slide, letting the audience signal that he's like James Gunn's being inclusive in this way. It's just stuff like that like the nuance of small things like that means so much, especially in a world where so many people like me as a bisexual trans person, as many people are feeling pushed out or whatever. You get those small little attention to detail from a creator like James Gunn, who is at the top of his game, is head of one of the biggest franchises out there right now, and could easily just let that go by the wayside, and no one would call him really on it. As we've seen with other things like Star Trek Strange New Worlds, with that in the mainstream, people praising and it doubling down on a lot of normative stuff. Seeing this show do stuff like that, it just speaks to why I love James Gunn so much. And so I just wanted to start off this review. I know that's like the tiniest thing, has nothing really to do with the actual review of the show, but it's just stuff like that this episode does that just remind me of why I love James Gunn. He's such a good guy at wrestling with themes of toxic masculinity and how systems hurt you and all of that stuff. And it comes out here in Peacemaker. So let us get into actual discussing of the episode. But I just wanted to put that up front because it's just, as someone who's been writing a lot of reviews of stuff that has kind of been saddening me lately, because it's just, it does do a lot of that normative stuff that is kind of ostracizing in a way, especially at a time where, people aren't willing to call that out as much, because it's like, oh yeah, just be a cheerleader for everything. It's nice to see. It's just really nice to see, especially from someone at the level of James Gunn. Anyways, let's get into this episode here. So, I really loved the previously on the DCEU opening that reset like some of the canon of like now having Guy Gardner and Hawkgirl appear in the flashback sequence instead of it being Aquaman and the Flash, setting it in this DC universe. I really thought that was kind of a clever little way to like rejigger the canon of this all to fit into the new DCU. I thought that was just a clever thing that James Gunn did there. So loved that. But then we actually get into the plot of the episode, and I will save the alternate universe stuff for in a little bit here, but we have a few different things going on. I like the setup that we get where Adebayo and Harcourt are both kind of out of work because the reveal about Task Force X existing back in season 1 of the show. But I love the relationship between Adebayo and Peacemaker, where they're kind of just bros, just being besties. I'm not entirely sure I love Adebayo having broken up with her partner. It feels like they probably didn't have the actress back or didn't want to deal with that side of the storyline. I always dislike storylines that break up couples, especially queer couples, between seasons, when I much would have rather have seen that. They did a very similar thing twice with Seven of Nine and Raffi on Star Trek Picard that frustrated me. So I'm not in love with that. But unlike Star Trek Picard, where it seems to have done that in season 3 to like turn down doing queer storylines, this episode is very much not shying away from any queer stuff. So I'm more forgiving of a storyline like that within this context, because there is a panoply of other queer shit going on. So it's not just like, oh, you're trying to run away from queer things. It's just the storyline that you're taking this character on. Again, showcasing how I'm totally fine with some of these tropes or things that I generally don't like if there's a context around them. So there's that. The scene where we have Peacemaker going and trying to do the interview was really, really good. Not only because all this stuff was funny with like Green Lantern and Hawkgirl and Maxwell Lord doing the interview, and like they can hear everything, or he can hear everything that they're saying. That was really, really funny. And also I just like the cameos and ties to the rest of the DCU. So I love that connection stuff. James Gunn's doing Marvel better than Marvel at this point. So like all of that, and I like that some of the stuff throughout this episode are dealing with ramifications from Superman. So all of that's really cool. But what I like the scene most of all for was it showcases that Peacemaker is actually trying to show growth and acknowledge that he doesn't want to be defined by his trauma and anger and the way his dad has mistreated him. And again, that's what James Gunn is so good at, is like tearing down toxic masculinity and showcasing how to heal from, normative masculinity and the trauma that masculinity in our culture tries to put onto men. And you can tell that Peacemaker is actually keeping it calm in the way he's being treated, because Peacemaker of last season or the Suicide Squad movie would have just lashed out and screamed at these people, and they probably would have deserved it. Not saying he would have been wrong to do that, but you see that he's trying to turn over a new leaf, and no one is seeing him. No one is seeing that, and they just have all these expectations placed upon him. In part, his own fault for how he acted in the past and letting that stuff define him, and that, that all the stuff that we saw last season, but no one's seeing that growth, and no one's willing to give him that chance. And no one's willing to acknowledge him. And, Guy Gardner is almost just as toxic as Peacemaker is, maybe less willing to straight up murder people, but he is the same way in a lot of senses, and yet they look down upon Peacemaker. And also in part probably because of class divisions as well, considering we see that Peacemaker comes from a lower income home with his father. So there's that element of it. And also there's a little bit of hypocrisy, that's the word I was looking for, on Hawkgirl, because we saw her literally murder the fucking Benjamin Netanyahu kind of guy from Superman, as absolutely she should have. I love that James Gunn repeatedly says over and over again, both in Superman and in Peacemaker season 1, where Peacemaker shoots his white supremacist fucking Nazi father, that it's actually okay to kill these horrific people who are enacting horrible violences and genocides against other people. It's not something you should actively try to do first thing, or seek out, but, not necessarily a bad thing if they're going to cause more continued harm. We can talk about the ethics of all of that, and I think there's this nuance there, but I like that is a thing that James Gunn repeatedly comes back to. But there's a bit of criticism here, hypocrisy. Jesus Christ, I don't know why I can't get that word. Hypocrisy here on Hawkgirl and Guy Gardner's part, because they both kind of done things, both in temperament and in actions, that Peacemaker himself has done. So maybe not to the same level or as far, but there is some level of the grayness of that. So I do like that within this context. Again, there's gray, there's nuance to that. I'm not saying it's all one for one, but I like that. We jump over to Harcourt. as well. And I like that she's dealing with toxic masculinity, and it's showcasing again that toxic masculinity is just not a guy thing. Yeah, it's played for some jokes here, but it's true. Like, people of all genders can try to live up to norms of masculinity and all of that stuff in our culture, and it'll be how it'll be weaponized against people will be different against women than against men, but both genders can live up to that same kind of expectation and ideal that comes out in toxic ways. So I thought that was really great, seeing that in this episode. But on top of that, we see that, Amanda Waller's like putting out her anger at her, and we see that Harcourt is lashing out and causing harm to herself by going to the biker gang, beating up guys. It was also really nice to have her say fuck that guy, but like she is being self-destructive because of the way her life's going, and she's pushing away people like Peacemaker, who's like, hey, maybe us having slept together was not a bad thing, but she just sees it, and like, not that she has to say she wants to be with Peacemaker or whatever, but like she is pushing people away when Peacemaker is trying to reach out and form relationships, whether they be romantic or friendship. Like, he's actually trying to build healthy relationships, and Harcourt's just not in a place for that, regardless if it's sexual, romantic, or just platonic. And so she just pushes him away. So again, great setup for her arc here. And then obviously we have Economos, who it's kind of like riding a razor's edge, and it's nice to see Frank Grillo here as Rick Flag Sr., who is, I guess, now the characters appearing in all the DC stuff so far. He was in Creature Commandos, now he's in this, he was in Superman, and obviously is upset that his son got killed way back in the Suicide Squad, so he's keeping an eye on Peacemaker, expecting him to fail. Again, that's just not a healthy place to build from, because it's just someone's waiting for you to fail, and you're not given chances to grow, because growing requires making mistakes. Not saying you shouldn't be held accountable if you've done harm, but like, growth requires making mistakes and trying to figure things out. And so, but understandably, Rick Flag understands why. There's an understandable reason. His son was murdered by this guy. So I'm not saying he's necessarily fully in the wrong there. But it is sort of cool to see him coming across all of the show in this series. So all of that's really cool setup. Obviously, they're looking for more technology, extraterrestrial technology, and we are dealing with the weird multi-dimensional tunnel thing that's in Peacemaker's home that we saw from season 1 of the show. I do like that they retconned that it's in a different spot too. I believe I read an interview where James Gunn apparently just forgot that the weird portal to another world was in a closet in season 1 and just had it here be a door. By the way, it was like in a bookshelf. It was somewhere else in the first season. They retconned it in the previously on and for this. So that's sort of the big thing, big MacGuffin of the season, I guess. And it's tying into Superman in a cool way of like, they were worried after the stuff with Lex Luthor and his like literally nearly tearing apart Metropolis with his portal technology. So like that there's a little tie-in to all of that makes sense within this story. But it leads us to the most interesting thing going on here, where Peacemaker goes and finds another door to apparently another dimension, because we see small things like pour some honey on me by Led Zeppelin instead of pour some sugar on me. So we're clearly in like another universe or whatever. But the big thing is his brother's still alive, his father's still alive, and they appear to be not only in a healthy relationship, but some form of superhero. Which is interesting. The one big question I have is like, are they actually superheroes in this story? Or are they superheroes within a awful context? Like, I'm really wondering, like, maybe in that universe, it's the Confederate States. Like, they're still white supremacists, but it's the Confederate States of America. So it's a white supremacist society, and that's why they're viewed as heroes, like literal KKK members riding in Birth of the Nations style in this universe, and that's why they're viewed as heroes. Or if they are legitimately good people within this world, and they just have an actual, like, healthy relationship and family, if it's just a completely healthy dynamic. I don't know. The way Peacemaker 2, the alternate universe Peacemaker, reacted to Peacemaker and literally just tried to straight up kill him without talking to him, has me leaning on the fact that they probably aren't entirely good guys. Good guys wouldn't just shoot first, ask questions later. But then again, seeing someone in your home looking like you and you've been trained to deal with shapeshifters and stuff, maybe not. So we'll see how eventually that goes. But Peacemaker 2 straight up almost killing him was dark. So it doesn't have me leaning into they're good guys necessarily. That's my theory going into this. But then our Peacemaker killing Peacemaker 2 and killing him is a good setup for the rest of the season. But yeah, you can see what this is going to be an interesting arc because, you know, Peacemaker is trying to grow and trying to build all of this stuff, build himself up without any level of support network. And now he'll go into another dynamic and he will have that support network from his family. But again, if my theory is correct, we'll see. Maybe they are actually heroes. There's two ways you could take that. There is the way of like, they are heroes, they are good people. And, you know, he has to learn, like, you can't just, you know, escape into another life. You actually have to learn to grow and like with the people around you. You can't just erase the traumas and let people and not help, like remove yourself from the community that you're around you and abandon them. And vice versa, they won't abandon you. So that could be the story. Or it could be they are literal Nazi white supremacists living in the Confederate States of America. And he says, oh, I can live in this really nice world, but I'd be doing horrific things. So I could live more healthily, but I could be putting down other people. So there's two different ways that story can go. I think both are interesting, and I think James Gunn is well equipped to handle both of those stories. So I'm curious to see where it's ultimately going to end up in the long run of the show, but both I think are pretty good. That's pretty much everything. We have a little bit of Vigilante here, working at a restaurant and wanting to do owl facts, which is very adorable, but not too much to say about him. I'm sure he'll come back into the story at some point. The only other thing to mention is the opening credit sequence. The opening credit sequence, I forget the name of the song. It's not as strong as Do You Really Want to Taste It? But I don't think, you know, James Gunn's trying to recreate some of that energy, and this is really good. It's a good opening, and I've had a lot of fun with it. I also had a lot of fun, by the way, with that alien xenomorph-looking guy who comes in from other dimensions. And Peacemaker's literally just like, you know, hi, well, screw you, that sort of thing. So that's fun and will be probably a recurring gag over the show. But, and goes to like how people are ignoring Peacemaker as well in a subtle way. But the opening credits are a lot of fun this year, but it's very hard to recapture that same level of surprise and novelty of the first season. So this season 2 is a lot of fun. I really enjoy it, but I doubt that this is going to recapture the same level of fervor that first season did, because that was just so out of left field, so unique, and so new that it's hard to recapture. But it's still a fun one. I love them all climbing on each other at the end there. It was a good time. So yeah, this is a really great season opener. I love James Gunn. I love the direction. Oh, the other thing I should mention, I almost forgot this, the orgy. I almost completely forgot the orgy. You know, it's fine. He's having a burnout sort of thing. What I will say about the orgy, though, is I do really like, again, speaking to queer stuff and bisexuality and things, that there was no fetishization of the bodies. There's just an orgy happening. And yeah, there's like showcasing, like, look at all these people writhing around and having an orgy around him, around Peacemaker. But there, you know, a lesser filmmaker would have just ogled the bodies of like, look at these hot guys and look at these sexy girls. But no, these are people of kind of, they're all generally hot, but they're not like pristine supermodels either, all of them. So I liked that these weren't just fetishized bodies, and the camera itself did not fetishize them. It was while it was still a spectacle of an orgy to a degree, it wasn't spectacleizing the bodies and necessarily the acts of sex itself. So kind of really liked the way he filmed that. That's just a subtle thing that I really like, because it's so easy to spectacleize shit like that, especially spectacleize women's bodies. But James Gunn doesn't have that fetishizing male quote-unquote gaze. God, I love James Gunn as a filmmaker. He's so good. It's so rare to see a filmmaker of this caliber working in like nerd shit that I love. Like Denis Villeneuve and a few others I can name here and there definitely exist. But they're fewer and further between. And so you just gotta love, unless you're a Snyder bro, you gotta love James Gunn. You can dislike James Gunn if you're not a Snyder bro. I'm not tossing that off, but you know what I'm saying. Anyways, loved this season premiere. Excited to see where the rest of the season goes. What did you think though? I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. But beyond all of that, I hope you, my friends, live long and prosper.